Hi, I'm Josh from Simple Thought Productions, and today I want to show you my replay workflow on a Tricaster utilizing the Xkeys Replay controller. I have some more detailed tutorials on utilizing replay on the Tricaster, so I'm not going to go too deep into the macros that we're utilizing. I'm more focusing here on the Xkeys surface, allowing me to have better control of replay, as well as the ability to have another operator assigned and utilize the Tricaster along with the technical director who's switching the show. In this particular setup, I'm actually using the Xkeys Replay controller, which ships with the replay interface, which has some really nice acrylic buttons that are printed. And in addition to that, I've customized it to the Tricaster since the default shipped one is more in line with vMix with its AB playout, which doesn't quite work on the Tricaster the same way. So I've customized this to be a little bit more in line with how I use the Tricaster. I'm going to kind of talk through that. But I want to kind of call that out as something where if you're utilizing this with the Tricaster, you may not want to get the Replay Edition simply so that you get standard buttons across the entire surface to give you that kind of maximum button coverage. But with that being said, if you look at those replay keys and you do want to utilize them because they're really nice custom printed ones, there's nothing stopping you from removing the keycaps and installing standard ones, and you can buy additional keycaps from Xkeys. So that's what these guys look like, where you simply just print out button labels, pop off the top, put them in, and close them back up. So I have a mixture here of the printed ones by Xkeys, which you can also do custom orders to have it say exactly what you want. I have a few of those, like Play Melt, Play Replay, or Pip Replay, etc., or the previous Ben or User 1, 2, etc. And they're really nice setups. So if you once you kind of get a look and feel to what you want, that might be something you want to look into in terms of ordering those custom keys. But in this particular case, I have a mix because sometimes I just like to customize this thing to a particular show. And it's nice to have that flexibility. So out of the gate, by default, the Tricaster does support the Xkeys. You can map any of these buttons to the Tricaster macro system and have those fire off macros to do all the things that you want. Where we run into a little bit of an issue and we need some help from central control is with the jog wheel and the jog shuttle to make our lives easier, and then finally with the T-bar, which there is no support at all for the T-bar natively. So on the jog wheel and jog shuttle, the Xkeys do have a mode that you can put it into where essentially it turns the Xkeys into a keyboard effectively, and you can go into hardware mode and then program it so that each time you step through the shuttle, for example, you could say each click send F1, and if I go in reverse, send F2. And then simply in the Tricaster, you go in and you then map those buttons to a macro. So when you go forward and you're listening on a macro config, this would send the F1 key, and the F1 key would be bound to that particular macro, and similar with F2. In that mode, you don't have to program these other buttons when you're in Windows working on the Xkeys control. You're simply programming the shuttle and the wheel. And then the rest of them will be mapped by the native Tricaster. It'll see the buttons, and you'll be able to map those easily to anything you want. You don't have to map every single key to something different. The next step would be on the wheel, which is a little bit more complicated. There are essentially several positions on each half of the wheel. So what you end up having to do is effectively like F3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way up to when you hit the maximum, which it'll allow you up to, I believe, 16 or F17 to send on those. But the difference on this one is the idea that you'll get to a point and hold it, and then you'll, as you fast forward through a long clip. And in that particular case, so what we'll do in the hardware mode is you'd want to set it to sleep for a certain amount of time, which you might say like half a second, and then repeat the key press. So essentially, if I go all the way to maximum, it would send a F3 key, wait half a second, and send F3, wait half a second, and it'll keep doing that until I let go. And that way, you can then bind the macro to that, and essentially the surface will send the key repeatedly until you let go, and therefore the Tricaster will keep repeating that macro over and over and over again until you let go. And that works. That will get you that set up with the wheel and the jog shuttle to work, but the T-bar is still not going to work in that particular setup. So again, moving into central control, what you'll get in that is the ability to use the T-bar. You'll be able to use the wheel and the shuttle all out the gate along with the buttons, and then do customized color controls so you can do some feedback. So when you bind the playback buttons, etc., to the Tricaster when it's playing, you can have those things reflect their colors appropriately to let you know the status of everything that's going on. So in the new central control project, I'm going to add 2 devices. First, we'll add the Tricaster, and then we will add the PI Engineering Xkeys Replay controller, which is the 64 jog T-bar. We need to configure the Tricaster, so I'll go ahead and put in the IP address and connect it. And we see Tricaster is enabled. And then similarly for the Xkeys, and we can do a quick test by going into set button feedback and do testing. And we can see that that button lights up as expected now. Going into the controls, first thing we're going to want to turn on is jump to control. That way when you press a button on the X keys, it will automatically get selected in the software for the configuration. This saves you a lot of time hunting around to be able to go through and set anything up. So the first button that I'm going to configure will be the play icon. So DDR play is inside of the list. You can control any of the devices that you've configured. In this case, we always want to send commands to the Tricaster for this use, so we're going to go ahead and select DDR play. And then in the parameters, you can select the DDR that you wish to control. In my case, I'm on a TC2, so I have 4 DDRs. I have the sound bin, and then finally delegated. If you're going to be utilizing multiple DDRs for different workflows, delegated is really nice in that you can go ahead and set DDR delegation, where you can set the 4 DDRs in sound playback. And essentially what that means is we could go ahead and set delegation here and assign it to like these buttons up here where I have 1 through 4. And what that will do essentially is that if I press 2, and that's set to DDR delegation DDR2, when I press that and then hit play, the play command will be sent to the delegate, which in that case, the last one that I pressed was DDR2, and it'll go to DDR2. This way, you don't have to have transport buttons, for example, for each of the DDRs. You can simply have one set of transport buttons, and then whichever delegate is selected will be the one that the commands are sent to. Since I exclusively work out of DDR2, I don't have this set, but it's a nice ability, especially with the other X keys, if you use the X keys to control everything on the Tricaster, not just the replay. So if we come back to the play button, we can go ahead and remove that, come down here to select play, and instead of delegated, I'm going to put DDR2 and put that into the command. And that's all there is to it in terms of assigning a command to a particular button. And then similarly, if I want to map the capture replay, you can go through and you can see all these commands, and you really have kind of 2 ways to go about this. One is you can control absolutely everything through macros on the Tricaster to do exactly what you want, in which case you would just simply do execute macro by name, put in the name, and then each button press will reach out to the Tricaster and tell it to execute the macro of that particular name and go from there. But there are quite a few features that are built into central control to make your life easy, so you don't have to create macros for every last thing. For example, one of the ones that I use regularly when I'm doing replay is the ability to use the bins as playlists. So we have the option to either copy all clips to a particular bin or copy the selected clips to a bin. So in that particular case, when you go through the properties, if we jump to what I have would normally be set for bin 1. For me, bin 1, 2, 3, 4 are my playlists 1 through 4, and bin 1 I usually have assigned into the 3rd slot. So the first playlist on my DDR is my scratch pad where I work for the current replays, set my in points, out points, play them back if it's a foul and I want that in really quick. And then if I want to keep it later, maybe I'll utilize for basketball, it would be bin 1 will be 3 pointers for the home team, bin 2 might be 3 pointers for the away team, 3 dunks, etc. And you can go out from there. So in that particular setup, if I go to bin 1, I want to take whatever's in my scratch pad, which would be number 1, and put it into 3. So I can, and again, if you did delegated, this would work through the delegation, but in my case, I'm doing DDR2. And now, automatically, when I press this button, any of the selected clips that I have will be taken out of my scratch pad and placed into bin 1 as a playlist, essentially, for later use. So I can build up melt reels and all those other fun things. And if I come over to the next one, again, I can simply increment this and add it in and quickly map out all of my copy commands on this particular one. When we get to the setting up buttons that we want to do for macros, if we come in here and select macro, execute macro, this is by name. So one of the things, we have my Tricaster IP address. This is by name, so whatever you've named your macro, you just simply need to type it into this particular area, and that's exactly what the Tricaster will execute when that particular button's pressed. I don't like to type across, so one of the things that I'll do is I will go to the Tricaster's IP address, and to this particular address, v1 dictionary key equals macro underscore list, and this will give you a list of all of the macros that are available in the active session on the Tricaster. And once that we have that selected, I can go ahead and search for things. So in this particular case, I have one for my melt reel. And in that particular melt reel, not only do I want to just copy it to the particular bin, which there's a great control that we just showed you how to do that, I like to add a transition and some other bits and pieces. So in that particular case, I don't want to just use the copy to, but I can come into here and select this part of the name, copy it, come over and paste it in. And now this command will work as needed. So this is a nice way for me to be able to kind of search around very quickly and get my macros that I have configured, paste them into here, and then I can add the command. And then now when I hit that particular button, that macro command will be sent automatically to the Tricaster. So this allows you to map very quickly the individual controls for the buttons. On the fader side, we have one T-bar, and what we can do here is we want to set the DDR speed. And again, similarly, it can work with delegated or any of the other ones, but I'm going to set this to DDR2, and then I do want to limit it to 100%, and I can add that in. So now on the Tricaster, as I adjust my T-bar, that will automatically adjust the clip. And on the Tricaster, if you go all the way down to 0% play speed and then ramp back up, it will automatically play back the clip. So we saw my DDR2 play indicator went red to show that the clip was starting to play back. The encoders, which is what is going to be named for the jog wheel and jog shuttle, we are then able to also go into here and set DDR seek, as well as some of the other transport positions, so that we can come through and we can set whether this is for full or just the particular clip. So if it is for full, it will be able to seek outside of the in and out points, which is what I prefer to have that set to. That way, if when I capture a replay, if it's not just right, I can then seek outside of it and set the out point or the in point as needed. When full is enabled, you're able to go outside those bounds. If for some particular reason you want to make sure that you just are able to rewind quickly to the endpoint, that would be where you wouldn't want this set to full. And then once you get to the endpoint, it will stop reacting to the inputs that you're sending in. So this is a quick kind of crash tutorial on how to get the Xkeys configured along with the Tricaster on central control. So looking at the particular workflow, since we don't have AB, we work out of one particular DDR. And when we call for replays, we can simply call for it. And In this particular case, I have these buttons additional for the angles. On the TC2, you can easily record upwards of 8 inputs and or mix or anything else. So I have these bound to those given recorders so that I can call in a particular angle directly or simply capture. And then I still have the ability to change angles. So we're looking here at a free throw right now. So if we wait and I want to say, okay, let's see if this particular person makes the free throw. They shoot, there's a miss. Let's go ahead and capture that. And now I have it on replay and we'll see it play back. Now again, these angles are not perfectly in alignment. So as I change angles, we will see there isn't perfect alignment. But again, that's not because of this controller and it's not because of the Tricaster. With where we're going with this. This is just simply because we're not playing them back in sequence. So when I have this particular shot, maybe I say, okay, you know what, this isn't really the angle I want. I'm going to go head over to the next angle. Now I'm seeing it from the next angle, exactly where I left off. I can play that back and see what was on that particular angle, which maybe I don't like that one and I want to come back up and change. So again, these are essentially delta changes where I can say go to the next one or the previous angle, and I can cycle through and play back those individual angles and go through. Now, this would be the most basic where you can say, hey, I want to show this replay. So I'm going to go ahead and click play replay, and we'll see it does the transition of the macro, plays back the clip. I can speed ramp to slow it down, see that rotation, the miss, oi, and the frustration, then map it back up to 100%, and we're back at live. Now, as we kind of go through these things, though, that's a really basic replay. I might want to change angles at the release. So in that particular case, I might want to split the clip, which will now give me 2. And I can move to that next angle. And now when I go ahead and hit play replay, we'll see it comes back. We see it starts out from this particular angle, and then it clips up to the next one and goes through the replay. And again, we saw that that did not have the exact ending because I didn't really look through to see where everything was going, and I had that transition. So again, with the dedicated replay, we might go, actually, I need a few more seconds. Let's wait till about here and go ahead and set the new out. And now that we see that those are 5, so again, if I go ahead and hit play replay, we'll see that that transitions back into that first clip and then goes up to the second clip and then plays out the transition. Now, this kind of first bend that we're looking at is essentially our scratch pad where we could do. So if there's a foul and we need to show the replay immediately, that's how we're doing it. But after that, we want to start building up those playlists. So again, if I press any of these bends, I might say I want to have 3 points, fouls, etc. You can kind of customize that what you want. But let's say that was something I wanted to have inside of the melt reel. I can go ahead and hit melt, and the clips disappeared. And if I go into the next bend, we can see those 2 clips that I created are now there with the transition automatically applied. Again, this is kind of going into detail on the behavior, but essentially what I'm doing here on the macros is I'm copying the clips from this bin into the second bin, and then I'm also applying a transition. So later on, if we're still going and we want to grab a replay, and again, I'm just kind of grabbing at random times here, so nothing too crazy, but if I go ahead and then assign that to the melt reel, again, when I come in there, now we see there's a third clip from 8 seconds. And again, that way, when we comes time to playing this melt back, it will play these 2 clips without any transition as they were designed to be played from 5 seconds to then to 5 seconds, and then it'll have a crossfade to the next clip, and so on and so forth. So this is allowing us to kind of build up a melt reel. So let's go ahead and see if we can wait for some, maybe we can get a basket here on this particular play. All right, so we missed on that particular one, and we're going to go ahead and hit 1, which I know will grab that left angle. And I want to slow that down. And again, I'm not even playing it, but it allows me to speed ramp. And, you know, that's perfect. Now, if I'm playing this stuff back, these change angles and everything still work. So I could potentially say, go to the next angle. I could say play, replay. It'll transition over. And we're playing in this one. Then I can actually say, go back to the next angle. And then back to the top one. So that was me changing angles during playback using the surface and essentially going through the various angles that are available. And we didn't actually do any sort of editing to that particular clip. So that's controlling it on the fly. But if we want to have something that works during our melt reel to do those angles, if we don't want to switch it live, then again, we simply will go through and find the individual points during the clip as we fast forward through where it's at, and then we can say split that clip, and now on this next one we're going to say we want to have the previous angle, and then we can fast forward to wherever we're at and say, okay, that's where we want to have that new out point, and huzzah, we now have those two clips that we can then play back and see that kind of replay. And as we go through, maybe in this particular clip, I don't want that into the melt reel, but I'm going to go ahead and put it into bin 1. And sure enough, when we go into the next bin, which is highlighted over here, this allows me to now build up. So again, if we could have one of these bins for 3 plays, and you can rename these things so that they have different names than just 1, 2, 3, but essentially scratch pad, melt reel, 3-pointers, fouls, etc. This allows us to start building up various bins or playlists effectively to go through, and then we can call these back at any given time. And from that, we are now able to create a replay experience that's easy to use and easy for a single operator to at least do what I would call basic replays, which is to grab a known particular angle, and you can program in the normal duration that you want for this. So, this is a pretty good shot. So maybe we simply say, hey, you know what? We want to play that back during a moment, since maybe there was a foul after the play. So we can go ahead and hit playback and then speed ramp. And slowly accelerate it back up to 100%. So the Xkeys Replay controller is really allowing you to kind of take that control to the next level in terms of, one, giving you a tactile interface that's easy to control next to your TD as a control surface if you're a single operator, but it also gives you that single control surface that you can give to an additional operator who can then operate that replay experience. And again, this is not going to get you all the features of a 3-play or an EVS system, but it's going to get you 90% of the way there. And the replay controller really helps make that become a reality in terms of giving your operator a dedicated surface to say, this will allow you to control the angles, you can control the bends. You don't have to necessarily touch or get access to the mouse or any of those other things. You can, as you're going through, if need be, they could be the ones that have control of the mouse, and they can come in here to properties. You can set the names. You could add additional comments for that sort of stuff. And again, I have some tutorials on replay workflows that talk about specifically pulling in individual values. There are other areas where you can pull in data link information so that you could populate this with the current time and score every time you pull out a replay, just so you have that available to you. But this really gets you into a good place where you can do replay with the Tricaster and have a good surface. And utilizing central control, you're able to get the full surface working, where previously you weren't able to get that T-bar. So again, I think it's silly, but that's one of the things that I think really makes a difference on replays, is when you're able to adjust that speed as needed, and being able to get that with central control, as well as the other ease of use in terms of mapping the jog wheel and jog shuttle without having to go into the programming mode, makes that really nice. So highly recommend this setup in terms of giving you a replay surface for the Tricaster. I think the Xkeys is a really solid unit, well built, and has lasted a few seasons now for me, and certainly taken a beating going on the road since we do fly pack setups, and it's done well. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. I'll answer as we can, as well as a link to the replay side. So if you want to take a look into the specific details about the macros as well as the control settings that I'm using on central control, you can take a closer look at that, and also download the macros so that you can kind of customize those to your needs.